Story 1. Running from the kitchen, bathroom, or bedroom to reach the television before the show returns. Waiting hours or watching a show you don't enjoy just to see the one you've been anticipating. Story 2. Life before social media and technology, such as cell phones and tablets, was different. We played outside with our friends all day long. Nobody knew where we were. They couldn't contact us, and we couldn't post our adventures online. Those were the days. Story 3. These days, I don't see kids going skinny dipping anymore. Everyone is afraid they will take pictures. Story 4. Slamming a phone receiver down on someone lets them know you are serious. Somehow, violently hitting end call on a smartphone just isn't quite the same. Story 5. Honestly, it feels strange to say, but there is a lot of snow. I'm only 24, but am I crazy to think winters are not snowing like they used to? I remember every winter having massive snowstorms that brought multiple feet of snow, but for the past decade, there have been maybe 1 or 2 storms that only bring 6 inches and melt in one day. Story 6. Drinking from a garden hose because it was still daytime and you couldn't go inside until dinner. Story 7. A good old-fashioned one-on-one fight. No phones, no interruptions, just 2 kids settling their differences and walking away. Story 8. Waiting in the passenger seat of an Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in a questionable trailer park for a long time. My friend finally comes out with red eyes and a lighter-than-expected bag he bought with the $20 you gave him. Story 9. Without cell phones or the internet, I would go to my friend's house to talk to her. While I was there, her mother would prepare something to eat and drink for us while we watched television or listened to music. Story 10. Michael Jackson's Thriller video was groundbreaking. He ensured that all the stations aired it, so even without cable, you could watch it on public television. Our household didn't have cable, and this was the first music video I ever saw. It is probably one of the best music videos, and it was available for free. Story 11. Going to an event and seeing everyone's faces experiencing the moment instead of a crowd blocked by phones. Story 12. Using a dial phone to call the drive-in theater to hear the recording of what is playing. Then going to the drive-in, setting up the speaker in your car window, burning mosquito coils to fend off the bugs, and during the intermission animation countdown between movies, going to the snack bar for some soft drinks, hot dogs, and candy. Story 13. Walking to the house and knocking on a child's door to ask his parents if he can come play. Now they can just text. Story 14. Being outside all day made us happy. We would get upset when called in to eat, even though we could return outdoors. We loved playing sports simply because we enjoyed it. We played World Wrestling Federation, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment. We had fun playing in the water. The 90s were a great time to be a kid. Story 15. Children today will never know what it is like to live in a time filled with smoke. Everyone smoked in the 1950s and 1960s. Secondhand smoke was common, and the environment was often filled with cigarette butts. Story 16. Hitting the TV to make it work properly and waiting for the bulbs to heat up before the TV came on. Story 17. Realistically speaking, parents often forced kids to go outside and play. Initially, we would resist, but eventually, we would become engrossed in some adventure as the day went on. In my city, we recently shut down our parks and recreation departments due to a lack of need, and our town struggles with managing finances effectively. Story 18. Playing all over the neighborhood with your schoolmates all summer long. Nobody called us home until dinner or bedtime. Story 19. When I was 15, I smoked on an airplane. I haven't traveled in a while, but I remember seeing those little ashtrays on my armrest as an adult. I would think, oh my gosh, this plane is old. Story 20. Running behind the mosquito fog truck, my siblings and I would routinely run and play in the fog being sprayed off the back of the truck as it slowly drove through our neighborhood to control the worst mosquitoes I have ever known. My parents were well aware of what we were doing and did not lift a finger to stop us. It's a wonder that we all made it to adulthood. Story 21. Not being allowed to play organized sports because I was a woman was challenging. I could pitch hardball but was told women could only play softball in gym class. There were no organized teams for women. I excelled in volleyball both outdoors and on indoor courts, but still had no organized team. In basketball, I made 48 out of 50 free throws, yet there was no women's team. There were no swim teams either. I did ride horses in competitions, which was allowed. My career choices were limited to nursing, teaching, or a secretarial position. I was not allowed to sell property without my new husband's signature, even though the property was entirely in my name. Most tragically, I witnessed a large portion of men my age die in war, resulting in the loss of a generation. Story 22. Playing outside until dark and respecting adults is important. No phones or tablets, actual interaction with friends is essential. Story 23. Sitting in the passenger seat of a car without a booster seat. I remember being 5 years old, barely able to look out the windows in my dad's diesel Jetta. Story 24. Not thinking about the internet, going all day playing with friends, fully engaged. Not being able to reach someone instantly. Writing down notes for family from phone calls. Arcades. So much. I grew up in the 1980s. Story 25. Life before the internet was different. If you wanted to research something, you went to the library. Owning an album or a compact disc instead of streaming the songs meant you paid for it once, and it was yours. You were often unreachable for most of the day when you were out with friends, which provided a sense of freedom. Going to the local record store to look for bootlegs or rarities brought joy, especially when you found something special. I could go on, but those are a few memories that come to mind. Additionally, Saturday morning cartoons were a treat. If you woke up early enough, you could watch classic shows like Popeye and Merry Melodies, some of which were even in black and white. Story 26. Practicing stop, drop, and roll every time the fire department visited our school made me think I would catch on fire more often than I have. So far, thankfully, 0 incidents. Story 27. Televisions that needed to warm up initially had only 4 channels, and on a good day, 5. The channels included 2 MAR, 5 WTTG, 11 BAL, 13 WJZ, and on a good day, 8 WGAL. Story 28. Back in the 1960s, my best friend and I rode our bikes to and from elementary school, as well as home for lunch. Seemed normal. Story 29. Watching 8-tracks turn into cassette tapes, vinyl records, Walkmans, CDs, iPods, and more. Rotary phones evolved from push buttons to cordless models to cell phones. Atari transitioned to Nintendo, Sega, Wii, and PlayStation. Dial-up evolved into digital subscriber line technology, which then transitioned to wireless and fiber optics. We have witnessed significant events and terrible atrocities in our lifetime, including the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I remain hopeful that we will experience peace in the future. One memory that stands out is waiting for the Thriller video to come on TV. It was such a big deal back then, and we waited for months. I couldn't wait to see it, and it was worth the anticipation. The hype and excitement made it an unforgettable experience. Story 30. I didn't have many friends, but I would read outside until I couldn't see without a streetlight, with my mom occasionally reminding me to come inside. Story 31. Having to cut off the landline and listen to the dial-up tone just to get on the internet on the old PC. Story 32. Waiting for their turn to use the large family computer that sits in the corner, as it is the only easily accessible way they have to connect to the internet. Story 33. The life of agreeing to disagree, or disagreeing with a friend or family member without ending the relationship. It can feel strange when you do not conform to the crowd but are not labeled a traitor or accused of being evil. It is possible to have a family member who may seem odd, but because you have not completely cut ties or publicly criticized them, you are seen as wrong, even if you lead a very different life and rarely interact with them. I believe people rarely experience this kind of dynamic anymore, and with children being online from such a young age, I doubt they will encounter it. The culture has shifted. Story 34. Watching wrecking balls demolish buildings was a prominent sight while driving around London in the 1980s. I used to love stopping to watch. Story 35. Does anyone remember the box? You had to call a number and enter a code to access the music videos. Also, there were hotlines. Story 36. Playing on the wooden playgrounds because they are too splintery. Those splinters are battle wounds and make it 100% more fun. Story 37. I've always thought that visiting the cockpit became an absolute no after September 11th. However, a quick search shows that if you ask and if the crew is not busy, anyone from babies to the elderly can visit the cockpit. Story 38. I'm going to choose real food, like delicious vegetables, fruits, and cereal made with whole grains and brown sugar instead of corn and high fructose corn syrup. The food was much better. Although my generation was exposed to high fructose corn syrup and food dyes, I don't think these kids will truly appreciate how good it used to be. Even fast food was so much better back then. Story 39. Renting video rental tapes every weekend. Reading encyclopedias instead of searching online. Sharing the family computer. Going out without a mobile phone. And the most heartbreaking to me, the climate we had 20 years ago. I miss transitional seasons. Now we only have either summer or harsh winter, with no in-between. We used to have really cold winters with temperatures dropping to -40 degrees Celsius, and so much snow that we built little igloo villages. Now it barely snows, and the coldest day this year was about -20 degrees Celsius. There were gradual transitions between seasons. I loved spring so much. Now it's -20 degrees one day and suddenly +20 the next. It makes me sad. Story 40. Road trips in multiple vehicles with directions printed from MapQuest and signaling out the windows to indicate to the others when to turn off the highway. Story 41. My friend and I used to call and pretend to conduct a random survey on whether people liked their toilet paper. Story 42. In my childhood, we didn't have the internet, and therefore kids today will never know the joy of not reading a repost of a 5-day-old AskReddit thread that has a nearly identical title. Story 43. When the teacher brings out the box television for movie day, it creates a whole new level of excitement and happiness. Story 44. People understand that it's just a joke and are able to have a laugh without getting upset about every little thing. Story 45. Having one home phone connected to a wall required an extra long cord for privacy. Parents constantly reminded us, "Don't tie up the line. I'm waiting for a call." Story 46. TV Guide channel and the inevitability of going there just to miss the channel you wanted to see the schedule for, having to wait for the entire thing to cycle back. Story 47. To the sound of a streetlight coming on, you know you better start pedaling that bike as fast as you can to get home. Story 48. Seeing bikes lying in someone's front yard. The kids were having a lot of fun in the basement. Story 49. Carrying quarters for a payphone or making a collect call to have your parents pick you up at the mall. Serving as the remote control for the television or standing there holding the rabbit ears to improve reception. Using a card catalog to find a book at the library. Carrying a portable stereo around the neighborhood at night with cassette tapes to enjoy your music. Story 50. We would tell our parents where we were going and who we were with, and then we would be gone all day. There were no phones or texting, just enough change in our pockets to make a phone call at a payphone if necessary. That was freedom. Story 51. Getting up during a potential snow day to watch the public access cable channel in hopes of seeing your district's name scroll past. Story 52. Going to your grandma's house for a meal and sitting on a thick phone book so you could reach the table. Story 53. Having a pocket full of change and cramming into a phone booth with your friends to call your boyfriend. Story 54. Discussing some piece of trivia because you could not instantly find the correct answer using a search engine. Story 55. Leaving the house for the day and wandering around with my friends. We used to walk everywhere, including downtown in my small town. We bought candy and read magazines at the local pharmacy. We went home around dinner time. Story 56. 10 kids spitting in your hair because you are the smallest, while the adults at the bus stop just ignore it. Story 57. Playing outside all day long. You knew every kid on your street and the next street over. Our friends down the street had a bell attached to their back porch that their mom would ring when it was time for dinner. We only headed home when the street lights came on. Kickball in the street was a common sight. We played on playgrounds where one could easily get injured or burned on a metal slide that was 20 feet long. We were adventurous. Now, kids only play in their backyards or at the park under close supervision. They rarely leave their houses, spending all day playing video games. Story 58. Being called from the other end of the house to change the TV channel for dad because he is tired and his feet hurt. Story 59. A beautiful summer day was spent climbing trees, riding bikes, and picking berries with friends, unsupervised, while all the parents were at work before mobile phones. Story 60. Calling your friend or crush's house and having their parents answer the phone can lead to a million questions. It's even more entertaining if a curious sibling is on the other line. Story 61. Moving from a cell phone to a computer to use the web properly required extra effort to access social media. Story 62. Slow internet, looking things up, and reading a map to help the driver navigate. Dealing with real people. Story 63. Playing outdoors until dark and then coming home when we realize it's time to be indoors. Story 64. Road tripping across the country in a station wagon with no air conditioning and your entire family. Seeing towns that were once small but are now large. Taking back roads to see historical sites and the best places. Story 65. Having to wait for the time your Saturday morning cartoon aired. Today, with streaming, you can watch Paw Patrol whenever and wherever. Story 66. The ability to be unaware of what other children are doing. The ability to distance oneself from the opinions of other children. Story 67. The feeling of absolute power of being a human GPS is incredible. Relatives visiting from out of town often rely on me for directions since my parents do not feel like writing them down. I don't know if I have ever in my life felt such power. I am now 35. Story 68. Having to fit going to the bathroom and grabbing snacks and drinks all in one advertisement break. Or you'll miss some Knight Rider. Advertisement breaks used to be a lot shorter than they are now. Story 69. Waiting for the radio or news station to announce school closings due to weather. Being my dad's remote control. Card catalogs and the smell of a library. Figuring out how to beat a video game without searching online. Story 70. A slower, natural pace of life, and truly living in the moment without it feeling like a significant effort. Story 71. Going to a river or small body of water, scooping a lot of tadpoles into your hands, or using a small container to collect tadpoles and raising them into frogs. Digging a hole in the backyard, placing a container in the hole, covering it halfway with a piece of wood, and returning the next day to see what fell in, such as lizards, scorpions, or snakes. Making mud pies in the garden, preparing the garden in early spring, and tending to it throughout the summer. Story 72. T-swings were exciting playground equipment consisting of a pole with a T-shaped structure inside it, featuring one swing on each arm that would spin around. While they were fun, they were also easy to misuse. Typically, the largest child would take one swing and pull it tightly around the pole, causing the lighter child on the other swing to spin quickly and fly high. Unfortunately, many children fell off and suffered injuries, leading to their removal from playgrounds. Story 73. The excitement of waiting for the ice cream truck to come down our street on a hot Sunday afternoon in summer was special. My brother and I would eagerly watch for the white truck. I loved the toasted almond flavor. Story 74. Keggers at the lake after my brother left. I was 19. All his friends were 22. I was working, but they weren't, so I'd buy a keg and they'd be my enforcers, ensuring we made money. It was a good time. Story 75. Dial-up internet and floppy disks. I am not sad about the former, but the latter is kind of fun in its own way. Story 76. I grew up attending school in Los Angeles County during the 1980s and 1990s, when street gang violence was at its peak. I even went to school during the Los Angeles riots but never had to practice or worry about an active shooter. Story 77. I visited my local video store, which had a promotion of rent one, get one free every Thursday. Every Thursday, I would rent several movies to binge with friends in one night since it was a one-night rental. It was a great experience, as long as we didn't have any obligations the following day. I also went to the pharmacy to get my photos printed, feeling excited about how they would turn out. Story 78. Offline gaming involves taking turns trying to defeat a boss in a video game or playfully competing against each other in Mario Kart 64. Story 79. Children's television. Every afternoon and Saturday morning, there were live shows with presenters and competitions. Now, there is no live block with television presenters. The Disney Channel is gone. It has moved to Disney Plus. Story 80. The excitement of watching movies that push technological boundaries is diminished. Movies used to have a real sense of wonder, but with advanced technology, the thrill has faded. A computer-generated dinosaur wielding a samurai sword? It has all been done. Story 81. Porn is a phenomenon that has evolved over time. In the past, accessing it required effort and secrecy. Often, the only place to view it was the living room, where timing was crucial to avoid detection while the family watched shows like Family Matters. An alibi was necessary, as seeing someone you knew in this context was highly unlikely. If it did happen, you might be stuck with some questionable mail order service, and using a credit card felt risky. Today, people have platforms like OnlyFans where for a small fee you can access explicit content. The ease of sharing this content on social media for fun changes the landscape entirely. Young people today will never fully understand the complexities surrounding adult content in the past. Story 82. The ice cream vendor drove around every evening in the summer. We would hear the music first and run inside begging for money. I haven't seen an ice cream truck making its rounds in ages. Story 83. Dialing a 7-digit phone number. I wait for a parent or adult to answer. When they do, I respond, "Hello, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. This is Sarah calling. Is Jackie there?" Story 84. Looking at an actual map for directions reminds me of my mom taking me for drives when I was younger. We had to depend on physical paper fold-up maps. Story 85. Here's a strange observation. I was trick-or-treating with a group of children and talking to another parent, reminiscing about Halloween during our childhood. I mentioned that years ago, we used to scoop fallen leaves into garbage bags and wrap them in spider webs to create spider victim corpses. As I recounted this, I looked around and noticed there were no leaves on the ground anywhere. Not a single tree had dropped a leaf by October 31st. They weren't even changing color yet. Yet I know for a fact that I used to have to rake leaves by mid-October 15 or 20 years ago because of this memory. So I guess, increasingly, children today won't get to experience autumn as a distinct season. It doesn't really count as autumn if it's happening in the last week of November. Does it? Story 86. A group of 11-year-olds held a meeting to decide whether getting hurt was serious enough to go home and involve their mom. Story 87. Going to a video rental store to choose a movie for family movie night because it is your turn to pick. Story 88. Running through the sprinklers in your neighbor's yard was a common activity in the 1980s. Kids today spend less time outside, and based on my own experience living in a suburban neighborhood in Texas, they are unlikely to run through someone else's yard. Story 89. AOL 2.0 is only softcore. Taking adult DVDs from your friend's dad, and using bunny ears to catch a glimpse of the Spice Channel. Oh yes, there are other important things too. Story 90. Failure means that individuals will never truly appreciate their successes because we ensure that nobody feels bad. It is the most foolish thing I have ever seen. Story 91. Significant freedom. Go out and play. There were no organized activities, no overbearing parents, no bike helmets, and no predators. Just childhood mischief and fun. I'm referring to the years between 1955 and 1965. We all got cars in 1965, and our horizons expanded, especially in the back seat. Story 92. Saturday early morning cartoons, when you only had 6 channels to watch with your favorite cereal. You needed a quarter for when your pager went off and you had to find and use a payphone. Story 93. Spending hours outside building a fort with your father's hammer and spare nails in the woods behind your house using scrap wood from the houses being built in the neighborhood. Story 94. Not that I consider it a significant loss, but Pogs involved throwing a heavy metal disc at a group of cardboard squares that cost far too much. Story 95. Being bored and having to fill your time is different from being constantly stimulated by things that meet your expectations and struggling to calm your mind. Story 96. Calling the theater to check movie times so your friend could call late at night without waking up your parents was convenient. Call waiting was helpful. Story 97. Lawn dart injuries account for an estimated 675 emergency department visits per year. 76 patients are described herein. The victims ranged from 1 to 18 years of age and were predominantly male, with a male-to-female ratio of 3.1 to 1. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.